This is a certified hood classic.
Sakafet, Sakafet. What's up to all my beautiful people from all corners of the world? Welcome to episode 5 of Culture Invasion, and I am your host, Etienne. In this episode, we're going to explore geology, paleontology, and the fruits of one man's dream. Of course, I'm going to spiral a little bit and drop a gem of knowledge as I do on every episode. But to start with, as always, remember my people, nothing is true and everything is permitted. The world around us is not an absolute reality. Your reality is subjective to what you choose to explore in this vast world. What you limit yourself to and experience is your own responsibility. Choose wisely. Without further ado, let's get it. As humans, we've been given the very gifts of our senses and intellect. We've mastered some of the most wonderful artistic, architectural, and scientific feats throughout the blip of time that is our existence. In this digital age, we have the history of man to learn from at the tips of our fingers, gigabytes of information flooding our personal devices in milliseconds. But through it all, some people hold the only job of waking up and just functioning. Just being the bare minimum at life. Accounting for age or illness, others limit themselves, choosing not to improve or explore and refine their experience here on Earth. When we wake up and function as part of the machine, we miss the life surrounding us. Life that is eventually left in the rear view. When we hold the job of only waking up and functioning as part of the machine, we leave no consideration for personal volition. We never exercise our free will to remain an upstanding and productive human. We fall to our worst behaviors. When we hold the job of only waking up and merely functioning as part of the machine, grinding away at our lives, we hide from one of the most basic rules that govern our existence. Our actions or lack thereof can have dire consequences. And today with me,
John Cook.
John, you and I met through the fraternity.
Yep, frat brothers.
Frat brothers. I met your dad.
Yep.
And then through him, I joined. You came in how many years ago?
3, 4.
3-4 years ago.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a geologist. I obtained a doctorate in paleontology, and
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll jump right in. You know.
Yeah. So you've earned a doctorate.
Mm-hmm. I got a PhD in paleontology. We looked at locomotion and biomechanics and extinct animals. So yeah, we did that in Australia. So I spent 5 years there. Prior to that, an undergrad work here in the state of Ohio, and high school diploma before that. Always been big in geology, finding rocks and looking at the world and looking at ancient history, real ancient history, you know. So that's something that's just been the big thing for me, and that's what I like. That's what I've been liking to study and move forward on. I'm a project geologist for a private geotechnical firm right now, and work with a lot of environmental assessments.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you do like the surveying?
A lot of it comes into basically we're out collecting samples from properties and testing to see what kind of contaminants are on the sites, whether or not they need to do, whether or not they have to do like voluntary action programs where they have to do some cleanups and things like that. Usually comes down to people trying to buy property and they want to know like the history of the property, and that's a phase 1 environmental work. And then in a phase 2 we've determined that there is contaminants, there's possible contaminants on the site. We have a very good understanding of, based upon the history of the site, what it probably is. And from there we work, we collect the samples and provide the evidence that yep, this is what's there, and depending upon the levels and like what's there, we'll either do more testing, more samples, or try to work to have like remediation work done. Yeah.
Now, so let's say I'm a home builder.
Yeah.
And your firm comes out and tests the area.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of mitigation that can take place
Oh yeah.
on the land, or is it like ruined? Is it just a...
Oh no. I mean, we're working on sites now that were former landfills that people are buying up and turning into luxury apartments. So like, I mean, you can do things to fix them, to like basically mitigate the pollution. Pollution's still there and everything, because you could have a place that's like a former steel mill, and so they have like heavy metals and things like that in the ground. From
like
the work,
off gassing of...
Yeah, and like, well, and it, you could have a contaminant in there, and like basically you seal up the indoor area so that way, when you're living inside an area, inside a building, they're not contaminated. Like the contamination is not there. So you basically seal up the bottom of the building. You have a vapor mitigation system that kind of helps move all that stuff out of the building and out from underneath it. And then like the open areas are usually capped like with 4 to 5 feet of clay, of good soil that's safe. So that way it's kind of keeping it separated, and it has to travel through very, dense material before it gets up there. The clay's not really dense relative to a lot of rock, but it can help like be a cap.
Right. Okay. I get it.
And then anything that's going to go like an area where the pad where the building would be, that gets sealed with like geomembranes and things that like are tarps and stuff. So that way it's got to go through all of that plus concrete plus everything else in order to even get to where you'll be breathing it in.
Got it.
And then we do constant air testing in it to make sure. And you got like radon gas alarms and everything to be like, hey, if that goes off, there's something wrong. So.
Awesome. All right. That makes sense.
No
Makes
problem.
perfect sense. Yeah. And then you'd have detection and other mitigation forums on the people side of
all
things.
over the place, and you're doing constant monthly. I mean, you got to keep the EPA happy.
Right.
So.
Makes sense. Now, do you do this is this for like big commercial outfits, or is this for smaller housing
it's a mix.
communities?
It's a big mix.
Okay.
It can be it just depends on who the client is, what the client wants, and what spot they want to build on. I mean, it all comes down to, it can be very expensive, but it can also be like a lot of the work that I'm doing is just like I've had proposals. I've had people ask me about doing like a testing site because they wanted to buy a house out in the country, and they wanted to make sure.
Sure.
And there's history. It was an old farm, and it had like an underground oil tank in it, on the site, and they're just like, we want to make sure that there wasn't a spill or anything. So can you just come out there? And then basically like they just didn't close on the building, on the house.
So it's a case by case kind of thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's what I do now. That's what pays the bills. But it's a kind of for me, geology in general, history of the earth. That's what has always got me going. I was the dinosaur kid, so.
Basically, you're just the dinosaur doctor.
Yeah. I did a paleontology, but project geology pays the bills, and you got to do what pays the bills. But the history of the Earth, and I think it's a very good idea to talk about and get people to know. Like, I know you're doing a podcast here. I'm trying my best. I want to work on building a YouTube channel to get people to see like geology around their areas, around the areas that they live in, places that they wouldn't even think.
I saw the couple posts you had up on Facebook a couple months back where you showed the river systems throughout the Midwestern United States and throughout the central United States.
Like all through the Mississippi's and the tributary. Yeah,
tributaries. Yeah, it's like it almost looks like the blood vessel system in the human body.
Absolutely.
when you
Absolutely.
when you really break it down and you're just focusing on those bodies of water, it's amazing.
It's kind of crazy how even a little creek that's like just here outside this apartment will flow into one river, and which will flow into another, and like miles and miles down the road, it finally gets out to the Gulf of Mexico and in the Caribbean.
Yep.
Like, there's a really good, I can't remember the website. There's a website that that has it where you can basically click on anywhere in the United States, and it sends you through every river that gets you out to an ocean. Like, my aunt sent that to me, and
That's something to look up. That's awesome.
yeah, like she's, a huge fly fisherman. She likes to go every time we go out to the country, national park, she's got to go, fly fishing. So with that, it's just, she knows, she's following all of that stuff, so. But yeah, my big thing is trying to get people to understand like the historical concepts on geology and like how it helped and how it affects things, how it affects the world around us. One of the best ones I've always thought about is like Gettysburg, not to jump topics, but to go in like the Battle of Gettysburg, we're talking about it, that being like one of the bloodiest battles in American history.
Right.
It is done, the battle doesn't happen that way if it's not for the fact that North American plate collides with Africa millions of years prior, because you have both armies basically running, like marching around the Appalachian Mountains.
Right.
They're like 5 miles away from each other, but there's a mountain range in between, and that mountain range is created because of the plate tectonics.
Plate collapse, or
Yeah,
the plate
collision.
collide.
Yeah. So they don't even realize where each other are until they meet in Gettysburg, and it's not done that way unless there's that collision, that orogeny.
Yeah.
So that mountain building process. So it's like things like that where it's like, think about a moment in history that's like phenomenal.
Or geographical
and it's
obstacle.
affected by geology.
Or geological.
Well, geographical, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's affected by that. And I'm like, I thought about that. I'm like,
Wasn't there an issue that, I almost want to say there was an issue that Napoleon encountered during the spring, because everything turned to mud after the winter and his troops couldn't get through part of Europe? I'm
not familiar with it, but it could happen like in Russia where like the thaw could like, because I know he had trouble going through Russia in the winter. Everyone always says you never do a land war.
Maybe it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it is the Russian winter.
But yeah, having
spring.
a thaw like that, if you had a big thaw, like things like that, that could really affect, trying to get people through it. But yeah, it's nuts to think about like those kind of things, and like how that's a process, that's something that doesn't happen. Certain, that battle doesn't, like things like that don't happen unless you have this thing happening. And it's millions of years apart, but it affects it.
Right. It's an impact to be seen for years later.
Yeah.
So before we spiral around into more chat, I have one question. Well, I have a couple questions I ask most of my guests. The first one I got for you is, if you were to write, direct, and produce a movie about your life, what would the title be? And then we'll kind of dive down that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the answer I gave was do what you gotta do. And I don't know why, but it's just a saying that I keep saying to people from time to time. Like, it could be something where it's like I'm talking to a friend and he goes, oh, well, I've got to go have dinner. And it's like, yeah, do what you got to do, or, It could be something where somebody's like, well, I've gotta go. I've got to go talk to this girl, or I got to go, I have to make a move or something. Do what you have to do. Do what you got to do. And I don't know why, but it's just been the saying that I've always said.
Do you feel that you're dismissing them, or do you feel that you're, that you've legitimized what they're expressing and you're giving them that nod of good old John Cook approval?
Yeah, well, I mean...
Are you the guy in the meme that stares at the camera and gives them that nod?
Yeah, I'm the mountain man out there.
Are you the mountain man?
I like to think that it's that, I mean, I think it can be used both ways. It can be used of like, yeah, do what you got to do. I don't care, get out of here. But it could also be, hey, you do you, because that's just kind of been my philosophy. Is everybody does what they want to do themselves. Don't screw around with other people. Don't piss each other off.
Yeah.
And just as long as you're doing what you have to do, as long as it's not, I mean, if you have to do something that's going to be crazy, that is going to affect somebody, I get it, but it's, you have to do what you have to do in order to survive, in order to move on, in order to adapt. I don't know.
Would you say that that's the way that you've lived your life? You've done what you've had to do, and made those good decisions to.
Oh, I mean, I think everybody makes mistakes and things like that. There's stuff that you wish you'd done, but I also think that I've done the things that I've needed to do in order to be where I'm at. You lose a few emotions, a few brain cells along the way or something like that. That's fine, but you gotta take the stress and the emotional trauma with everything. I mean, like grad school, perfect example of that. Grad school was it's a tough one. I'll tell you that. Like grad school for anybody. I think the first week I got to grad school. For history's sake, I went to grad school overseas in Australia on my own. Got a full ride and was able to go. And that's the only reason why I did it. I think I was going to do a master's there. And then my plan was to get my PhD back in like Colorado or Wyoming or something like that, somewhere where there's a lot of paleontology.
Yeah.
But I got talked into doing my doctorate there. And I was just like, well, it's a free ride. Why not? We'll get it done. And like in the first week, I overheard somebody talking about how one of their students had like an emotional breakdown. Like she had to quit grad school, had an emotional breakdown, had to go to the hospital. And it, like that was like the first week of grad school that you overhear that, and you just like, it's eye-opening where you're just like, what have I gotten myself into?
Right. What are my expectations?
Yeah.
Do I have to reset things for myself?
Like, and you kind of know, but you don't know. Where like what you need to do in order to get the degree,
right?
But you don't realize like all the craziness that's going to happen along the way,
right?
And so yeah, I mean, you get to those points where you're having long nights in labs, long nights writing up papers. That's why I try to tell people who are in that position that are going for graduate levels, like, plan accordingly, relax, find ways to de-stress, and on top of that, put people around you that can help you either keep you focused or can take, and at the same time can take you away from the stress of what's causing stress, so you can release your energy and get back to it on another day.
Right. And be able to better focus.
Yeah.
And lock down the vision of where you have to go with things.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of academics will understand, like, reviewer too can be a pain in the back, pain in the backside. Like, when you're writing up your paper, you're putting in everything, and you write it all up, and you think you have it, you think you've got it. And I mean, like, I'm a bad writer. I will say that. Like, it took me forever to get writing done, but I can get research done. I can go get data collected.
Right.
But in writing it, you send it off, you You wait a couple of weeks, turns into a month, and it comes back, and it's like, there's always that one reviewer that's like, why did you even pick this topic? Oh my God. Like, we don't need that. Like, this is ridiculous. No one cares. You know, and like they're not saying that completely, but like they get to the point where they're just like, it's always reviewer 2 is the running meme.
Yep. Do you ever hit a point of saturation that manifests into analysis paralysis?
What do you mean by that?
Where you just you essentially hit a mental block. So it's almost like writer's block, but you started down the path, and then you kind of reanalyze and overanalyze, and then want to deconstruct what you've already created that's already along the proper path.
All the time.
Then you scrap most of it or all of it, start over, then end up going down the same exact path again.
Yeah. No, I've never put a word to it, but yeah, I've had those.
It's analysis paralysis.
I had a moment where I was trying to put so many variables into a data collection that, because I wanted every point of variable, like what was the ambient temperature in, does the temperature, and like the advisor had to pull me back and be like, you don't need to worry about it. You kind of want to be able to be like, yeah, but I'll have all this static chaos and everything, and then I can find patterns within the static and all that stuff. And it's like, no, you don't need that.
Yes.
And then you're sitting there half naked in your underwear with a blanket around yourself, watching the static on the TV, going, I see it.
Rocking yourself. Yes, that's the analysis paralysis part. Yeah, and it can be anything as simple as applying a vinyl decal to your vehicle.
Just slap it on.
Just slap it on.
My girlfriend and I bought a Yeti.
Yeah.
And we're putting stickers on it and everything. And I'm like, I'm the terrible guy who's just like, just put it on.
Just slap one.
And she's like, no, like, do we want it over here? Do we want it over there?
Catty corner.
And I give her all the credit because I get it. You want to make sure it looks nice. You want to make, you don't want to make it one side heavy, one side, and like I just can't. I look at it, I'm like, just put it on there.
Yeah. It feels fun sometimes just to say go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that, in our professional careers, we obviously we have the guidelines and the blinders we have to keep on to make sure that processes work. But yeah, in private life, it's always fun.
No, I think I had one in my job where we had a contaminant. We had a high contaminant on something, and it was actually natural. It was a natural occurring thing because of the way the rock was, the bedrock formed.
Okay.
And to keep it, I'll keep it simple with it. So, like, we got a hit of arsenic.
Okay.
A really high hit of arsenic, and it was like 20 feet down in a well, in a boring. And you're sitting there going, well, wait a minute, like, how do we have this huge hit of arsenic, and why is it that far down? Like, no one's doing something 20 feet below the ground unless it's like a bunker, and even then it's like there's no chance it's a bunker. The federal government would be on our butts, be like, what are you doing here? And I've come to find out, like, you do a little bit of research and you realize that the arsenic is coming from the shale. So shale will generate arsenic. And
is that like as it breaks down? Or?
No. The shale is formed because of arsenic.
Oh.
So there is it's an arsenic. There's a type of shale that can be more arsenic dominant in its chemical structure.
Got it.
And it comes down to the way the oceans, what's going on in the oceans when shale is formed. So shale is formed at like deep marine deposits.
Okay.
And so depending upon what kind of bacterial or microbials are down there and eating can depend upon what they release, and depends upon how the rock is being made.
Yeah.
And like we were writing up this report for a client and we had to excuse this arsenic out because it's so far, and we're like, well, it's so far down and everything, and like I'm sitting there going, well, I want to write up like how the rock is formed and everything. I wanted to, and like my boss is like, nobody cares, and I'm like, but why? I'm like, don't. And it's like, he goes, well, the only people who are going to read this are the bankers, and the bankers aren't going to care.
The bankers have their own level of speak.
Yeah, the bankers, and it's not that the bankers don't care. It's just like they need to know whether or not it's acceptable for them to have this property, or if it's not worth buying.
Yep.
And you completely understand that. And from there, but I'm like, well, can't we just put it in anyways? I mean, like, if they're not going to read this section, like, does it matter if I put it in or not? I'm like, I just want to put it in because it's like, just in case somebody decides to read it and gets curious, they get a little bit of knowledge of like, oh, so that's why. Like, no one's going to know what that, no one's going to care.
Yeah, you bring, like, I get it exactly. Like, you bring all these skills, all this knowledge, all this stuff that you're passionate about and knowledgeable in, and then you just to have it all trimmed down and distilled down to just this one, the 2-line paragraph, this one compound sentence of describing something that you spent. So how long did it take you to get your doctorate?
5 years.
So yeah, the 5 years that you took is now distilled down to one sentence.
Yeah, exactly. You have this beautiful, it's like you wrote this beautiful, elegant poem, and all of a sudden it's just one line. It's a word. That's what it means, but
So when we look at our careers, I've reached what I would probably categorize as that statistical professional stride. I'm in my 40s, pinnacle in my career path. I was sought out by multiple employers, which I'd never experienced before.
But that's a big sign. Like I was saying, that's a big sign that you're doing it. Like, you can talk about it, it's imposter syndrome. And I developed imposter syndrome in grad school. I think everybody does. And it's still there for me. Where, like, when you're applying for new jobs, you're questioning, how much am I actually worth? Am I really worth the average, or am I not? Or am I worth more? And like, you're doing the job, and you're trying to decide. You're like, you don't want to come into the application and be like, yeah, I'm worth the average, and then come to find out they're like, no, you're not. You're worth the bottom. Like, come on.
Right.
So you get that fear. And at the same time, like we were saying, it kind of, to go into the older people kind of have to, will look down on the new guys coming in, like Owen and Darwin. So
explain for me.
Okay, so everyone knows Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution. What the person you may not know is Richard Owens.
Okay.
So Owens is the guy who came up with the name dinosaur. Dinosauria. So he was in charge of the Museum of Natural History in London, head of the Royal Society of Biology, big guy. He has named a lot of the ancient animals, like most of the animals that were found in like Australia, New Zealand. Owen probably looked at them.
Wow.
And he hated Darwin. Just like, I think Darwin goes out on his HMS Beagle trip, goes to the Galapagos, sees the finches, all that, and, comes back, and he doesn't publish. Like, what people don't realize is, like, Darwin sat on his work. Like, who knows why he did it, but he just he had a lot of the theory of evolution intact. He just sat on it and didn't publish it. And I think they even hired somebody to help, like, prod him to be like, come on, get it done. And he's still, like, just being a scientist, half the time you're just like, I just want to relax and chill, and Darwin was the same way. And so he gets word that somebody has a similar theory, and he has to like rush in and be like, no, I already had all this data, I already did it all, see, I was the one who did it first, blah, blah blah blah. And Owen is just pissed. He is, like a long story short, Owen's just like, nope, I hate this guy, just going after him all the time. And finally, like, the society was like, okay, well, Darwin did have this information, so him and this other guy, I can't remember the other guy's name, he has, you guys can both present your work to the society at the same night, the same meeting. Cool. And it's crazy because, like, Darwin becomes this really well-known scientist with this big theory on how, gradualism and gradualism and how,
right.
Animals evolve. And Owen, who at the time is the head of the museum, the biggest museum in the world for natural history, has to sit there and realize, oh crud, this guy, my rival, is taking everything. Like, there's a statue of Charles Darwin in the foyer in London in that museum.
Oh, wow.
And it's Owen's building. And, like, if it's not for Owen, the building doesn't get made. So it's like, you got to sit there and think like Owen's sitting there going, my rival, this punk ass kid rival has a statue in my building. But yeah, you get that point where it's like, well, Einstein, another example. So, like, Einstein comes up with the theory of, like, relativity or something like that. Like,
okay.
Comes up with one of these theories, and there's a quote, like, all these physicists get angry and write about, like 100 of them sign this letter that basically, goes after his theory. It's like, Einstein doesn't know what he's talking about. There's no way that this can, that gravity can be, can be altered depending upon where you're at. And, it's all about perspective. That's a load of crap. It has to be this, because everyone's thinking Newtonian physics. And Einstein replies back with, why 100 when all you need was one person to prove me wrong?
Right.
And that's
right.
Like, with science, it's like, yeah, you've got to be on your back. You got to be on, with head on a swivel looking around, because it's like, make sure you know what you're saying, because in a few years, it could be wrong. I mean, talking about paleontology, we did not know how the dinosaurs died until 1991. We had no definitive proof until the early 90s how dinosaurs died.
Do you think that there's part of that stringent perspective of the more senior scientists because of theory?
You mean like how, because it's all on a theory, they've got to, like, and it needs to be backed up?
Yep.
Yeah, I think there's it's a two-way road. I think you got to bring the receipts, as they say.
Right.
But at the same time, it can be a gatekeeping issue. You can have situations where, I mean, as I said, there are so many times where if you say something that is outlandish, that even though you have your receipts,
right,
they will, people will stand up and just say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. How dare you? And I get it. It's kind of the only way to describe it is, this is the best system we have so far. It's the only, it's a crappy system, but it works in the scientific realm, because you have to be able to back it up. No matter what you say, you have to be able to say, I have the data, this is the data, this is what it says, and this is how I've shown it.
Right.
Because if you don't, then you can say all kinds of stuff, and it doesn't matter. But at the same time, that can become a gatekeeping issue where it's, well, you don't agree with what I'm saying, so I'm going to fight tooth and nail to make sure you don't say, you can't do anything. You can't get the funding you want. You can't get, the information you need. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I kind of backed away from academia, was just how crazy it can be. And a lot of we have to suck up to the older people. We have to make sure that we, rub their feet and make sure everybody's happy,
Right.
And it's like, well, I'm all for being polite and everything, but we need to, if you got the right information, you got the right information. That's not to say I have the right information. That's to say, like, it doesn't matter who you are.
Right.
And it is kind of an issue with that, where people could argue for things that are different. Like I said, we had absolutely no understanding, and we had no evidence of a crater until we were able to have satellite images of the Caribbean, of the Yucatan Peninsula, to say, yeah, there's a crater there. It's 200 miles wide. That's an asteroid hit. Something had to happen. Until then, it was a theory. It was a prominent theory, but it was also like, maybe the plant eaters ate. I remember reading this as a kid. It was like, maybe the plant eaters ate a poisonous plant, and that like affected the meat, and the meat eaters ate the plant eaters that were affected, and that killed everybody off. Things like that.
I think I remember that theory as well as a kid. Yeah.
Like, those were prominent thoughts, and like, you look back at that and you're like, well, wait a minute, what were they eating that could have done that? But you have those kind of crazy, that was a theory, that was a prominent theory, and now we look back and go, there's no way that's what happened.
Yeah. So I think on the technology side, we see a lot of people do the same thing, gatekeep departments, gatekeep positions, concepts.
All the time.
Where I worked at my last job, we had a lot of products that were essentially small room projects that turned out to service libraries in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And, we integrated them. But as far as modernizing the services, they were gatekept.
They didn't want to modernize it.
There was a conscious effort not to in a lot of cases. It almost seems like it's just a conscious effort not to. There's there's always the resource constraints that you have. There's always the turnover, but you have to move forward, and the willingness to move forward. If it's not there, it's either human laziness or they're gatekeeping. Yeah.
And it can be, I can see an issue where, my dog's asleep, I'm sorry.
We have a studio dog this episode.
Yeah, so he's he's chasing something in his dream. I apologize. Go get him, buddy. So we're, you can have situations where, like, I think sometimes people aren't looking at the thought, like they're not seeing that they're gatekeeping because they're focused on, they got blinders on and they're looking at something else. But then it's like, you want to be able to pull them out and go, hey, no, look at what's going on here, look at why you've done that, and see how it affects. There's one where in the paleontological world, academics don't want to use private museums.
Okay.
So they don't want to use specimens that are held by private collectors, because they argue that, like, well, no one can go and see them, and the public will have to, it's not like the public can really go and see these things. These are private collections.
Right.
And to an extent, yes.
Right.
But at the same time, I've gone to museums that are private collections, and they have some of the most fascinating specimens that people need to see.
Right.
And that would be great for research. I just took a trip out to Wyoming. I like to go there as much as possible. I started going there a couple of years ago. I went out to Colorado for field work when I was an undergrad. And, I stopped off at a little place. I'm going to advertise it. I stopped off at Thermopolis, Wyoming, and there's a Wyoming Dinosaur Center there. Mm-hmm. Place is amazing.
No, this isn't the place that Pee Wee Herman went to in Pee Wee's Big Adventure, is it?
No, not at all. No, the Wyoming Dinosaur, like, let me, to kind of give you an example, let me just describe this location, Thermopolis.
Sure.
So, if anyone's ever familiar, if people who haven't been to Wyoming, to describe it, Wyoming is, it's a very vast, big state. It's the least populated state in the United States, and it's just this large place with a lot of mountain ranges and basins and ranges. As you travel west, if you were to get through to like Casper, Wyoming, which is like center, if you go north and south, it would be like hit a center line, but it's on like the eastern third of Wyoming. So if you go from Casper and you're heading west, you'll take one of the most, it's always been described as, it's described in a lot of like my field books as like one of the most boring geological areas in Wyoming, which is very rare to say. But you take this long drive and you get to a little town called Shoshone. Shoshone is literally like, there's a gas station, a diner, a couple of buildings. I mean, the city hall is for sale. I'm not kidding. I was in there. The city hall is for sale. There's a for sale sign for it.
Wow.
You know, you head north into this reservation area.
Yeah.
And there's a canyon called Wind River Canyon because the Wind River Mountains are there. So they have every layer of rock, every age of rock from the Permian. From the Precambrian and Cambrian, which is like real early life, to the Triassic. The north end is the Triassic, early dinosaurs.
Okay.
So as you go out the north end, you're in Thermopolis, and it is literally dinosaur area. To the north end of Thermopolis is the world's largest hot spring system. So they have Hot Spring State Park there. It is a geothermal. I mean, I stayed at a hotel that had a hot tub, geothermically powered.
Yes, I love it.
It smells of sulfur,
of course.
But it is fantastic as a geologist to sit in a hot tub and go, I am being warmed by the earth.
So, fun fact.
Yeah.
My father's island, St. Lucia, where Dad hails from. St. Lucia is exactly the same way.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's a geological hot spring.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's 100% dormant, so there's no chance of any kind of eruption or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
With this one, I mean, like it's got to be sitting. I've never done the map, but I'm sure it's sitting in the Yellowstone caldera, because Yellowstone is literally 3 hours northwest of there. Well, 4 hours north. Cody is like 3 hours northwest of there, but like another hour and a half and you're in Yellowstone.
Yes.
And so you've got to be somewhat within the caldera or around that caldera, and that's what's heating it up.
It's feeding into it. It's
or it's one of those. It may not be that caldera, but it's a part of that kind of system. And they have a museum to go back into Thermopolis. They have a museum there, and it is great. It's a great little. I mean, it's a big, kind of like an airplane hangar. That's the only way to describe it. Mm-hmm. Got a little gift shop. Got a good history of the world kind of thing where, they're going through the history of life. Mm-hmm. Opens up to a lot of dinosaurs, and I got to talk with the guys there. And like they're working on some really cool trackways, trying to dig out areas up on a ridge. Allosaurus bones. They've got all kinds of these things, all kinds of specimens. And I'm trying to talk to them. I'm like, has anybody done any research on this? And they're like, no. Well, we get to do research, but not many people want to do any research. Excuse me. And it's all because, it's a private collection.
I was just going to ask. It's a private collection.
It's a private collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, we worked with a guy who was in charge of, when I was in grad school, he was in charge of like the Natural History Museum in Berlin.
Yeah.
Or he wasn't in charge of it, but he was like one of the head paleontologists there. And he's talked privately about like private collections, and he's like, I wish I could get into them, but I can't because it's a private collection, so we can't really use it. And it's just well, why are we gatekeeping in that? Why are we saying that's something that's, like, I get where it's like, yeah, it can be bought illegally, or it can be, like, people can't go and see them and all that stuff. But it's like, here's something. Use that for the data. Use that for the research. Because I'll tell you this, half of the specimen collections that are in museums,
Right.
The public doesn't get to see.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's,
yeah.
and we're talking, and look, they're not museum grade. They're fragments. They're things that have been
Yep.
collected that
the backroom collections
Yeah.
that are in all the drawers and all the lock boxes
Yeah.
and safes and everything.
yeah, you're not going to get all that.
Right.
But, that's where it's like, let's at least write up a paper, describe it, talk about what we're seeing.
Another piece of knowledge, another resource that can, maybe perhaps contribute to something better down the road.
Yeah.
But at least document it and record it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like, in this digital age, there'd be a problem with that.
Oh, yeah. And you could do things like photogrammetry.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, where
Yep.
you could, that's something, that'll be, I'm sure that'll be the next stage. With COVID and everything, people can't get into museums and stuff, but kids need to learn. Photogrammetry with a QR code. Hey, you can see this thing and rotate it on your tablet and look it around. It's nice.
Put your VR goggles on.
Yeah, VR goggles and look through it and see the Louvre, or
Right.
go see the Dinosaur Hall in New York and enjoy yourself. But yeah, you do need to be able to stand up and look at it and see it and feel the weight of it.
Right.
But at the very least, you can at least see the image and kind of acknowledge and get some kind of understanding for it. But yeah, I think that it's like we got to be able to. That's why it's like, for me, if I could get to the chance to do it, I'd like to do, like I said, a YouTube channel on kind of following what you've done. Do a YouTube channel where I am showing people the places around and go, this is something historical, but it's historical. Think about it far beyond in the early days, like when humans weren't even a thought,
Right. Right.
And you can build, and understand like how this place gets built.
It's definitely a humbling perspective. I don't think many people spend time on.
If you were to set, I don't know, have you ever heard the thought experiment of if the world was like the history of the world is in a day?
No.
So if the history of the world's one day, all was all done in one day, the first 3 hours of the world would just be meteorite bombardment. That's it.
Wow.
3 a.m. to from midnight to 3 a.m. just meteorite bombardments.
And this is like the history of the world that spanned from beginning of time till now.
Yeah, from the beginning of the Earth coming into existence till now.
Wow.
And then I think at 3 o'clock to 6, you're getting some type of life. Nothing much. And then the first actual single-celled organism that has a cell is doesn't come around until 2:04 p.m. And then
Wow.
yeah, humans
We've already gone through the 6 a.m.
Yeah,
to
we're
12
already past
p.m.
noon.
Right.
Yeah.
The 12 p.m. span. That
Yeah.
6-hour span alone.
I think from 6 to noon, 6 a.m. to noon is oxygen levels would be rising and lowering, banded iron formations. You see that up in northern Michigan, where you'll see that it's iron deposits, but they're changing between silver and red.
Yeah.
And it's just the change of oxygen levels. So the silver is very low oxygen, red high oxygen because it's rust.
Those little adjustments.
Yeah.
In the concentration.
Just fluctuating.
Yep.
And then after that, I think dinosaurs come in at maybe it's 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And human beings don't come into existence until 11:48 with 32 seconds.
And that's where we are now.
Yeah, and that's early, that's the Ethiopian rift, the first Homo sapien.
Yeah.
Australopithecus decides to stand up, things
Right.
like that.
Right.
So that's that's where it's you realize the history, how much history we have in the world of what we've done in written history. The pyramids, the Mayans, the
Roman Empire.
the Roman Empire, the Wall of China, Napoleon, World War II, all that stuff. that's like the last the millisecond.
The last
Yeah.
millisecond of time.
Yeah, that's that finger snap was a lot faster.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe just as fast. You know, so
That's fascinating.
you know, but you think about it, and it's like all of it comes into existence because you have all this rock, all of this rock layers being, you know, happening. Things are colliding, hitting each other. Certain things happen.
The earth is churning and moaning. And
Yep. Northern Canada, where they found Tiktaalik, which was this like first like limbed amphibian, and like the animal that actually stepped foot on the ground, the vertebrate that actually first stepped foot outside of water. They predicted it. They looked around and they're like, we need to figure out where this transitional fossil is.
Right.
Where can we go? And they realized like, well, there's certain spots that have that era of time, bedrock, and that will provide that environmental deposit. And they found it up in like northern Alberta, and that's where it was. And it's like, you realize this is like a giant amphibian. It's not going to be living in the northern Alberta tundra.
Right.
It's going to be living in like a tropical rainforest at the time. So that deposit at where it was somewhere closer to the pole, it was somewhere closer to the equator.
It was an area of specific condition,
Yeah.
but it didn't fit the bill 100%. And it ended up being somewhere that was much more tropical, that was much more favorable for that kind of
Yeah, so
evolutionary
you know,
step.
for that deposit, that rock layer deposit, it wasn't where it was,
Right.
where it is now. It was somewhere else, and it shifted and moved to
Oh!
where it is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's like glacial shift.
Yeah, so the plates are all moving around and bouncing around and everything. So when this thing was there, when this thing was living around, that spot, that area on the land,
Right.
was not where it is, not in northern Alberta. It's like closer to the Caribbean or closer to the equator, you know. So it's movement. It's been moved, and like we see that similarly, not to bounce around, but Hawaii,
Yeah.
and again to go back into Wyoming, Yellowstone, same thing. So Hawaii, you can see the islands are hot spots. So there's a hot spot underneath Hawaii.
Yes.
And the plates go across it,
Yes.
you know. And so where the island, what is it? I think it's Honolulu, where Honolulu is now. I think it's one of them. It's either that one or it's the other one, or the other far one is the newest one.
Oh, right. Yeah.
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 And
the newest
one-
island formation.
Yeah, because you've got all the volcanoes and stuff. You still have volcanoes on the other one,
Right.
but like one of them is newest, one of them is on the other side of the island chain is the oldest one,
Yes.
and because it's moving across the hot spot.
Yes.
You see that in Yellowstone. Yellowstone follows the Snake River that, you know, through Idaho and into like Washington and Oregon. And you can see the same, if you follow the Snake River system, you can see the same type of rhyolite that's there, the volcanic rock,
Okay.
same type, and it follows the Snake River into Yellowstone because the hotspot was there, but the rock layer is moving to the, was more over in Oregon, and as Oregon moves west, as that, you know, or
Tectonic plate.
yeah, or as the tectonic plate moves.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm getting this a little confused, so my apologies. But as the stuff moves below it,
Right.
I mean, as the plate moves on top,
Right.
it crosses over the hot spot, and so it looks like it's forming more land on top.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
So-
I get it. So as it goes along the river, as it's following along that
Yeah.
area, you're having the different spots
Yeah.
that are
as
affected
you
by
move
that plate.
as you move east
that plate movement.
on the Snake River,
Yep.
you will see the moving more east is the younger part of that rock layer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Got
So
it. Got
yeah,
it.
because the west side is the older side.
Got it.
So it would move further into like Cody, which is the city to the east of Yellowstone.
Yes.
But like we're talking millions of years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So, all right. We've talked enough about our jobs. What hobbies? What hobbies do you have out there? What do you-
I play hockey
What do you do for? So you do hockey for fun?
Yeah.
For fun?
for fun. For fun. Although I'm a goalie for hockey, and I do a lot of beer league. I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm any good, but I always get asked to play a lot, so I like that. You know.
You're not a small guy.
No, I'm pretty tall. I'm 6'3", so that is helpful. But at the same time, it's also a burden because it's hard to kind of drop down into butterfly where you're, you know, on your knees trying to block shots.
Right.
But hockey, big thing. Played music, you know. Those have been my big hobbies, you know. So yeah, but yeah, hockey's been the big one. I finally got that full-time job and was able to pay for the thousands of dollars a year. Hockey, you talk about gatekeeping. Hockey is a situation where the gatekeeping is the price tag.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
Like where we live, you know, there wasn't. It's not a big. It's weird. It's not a big hockey community. People wouldn't think it is.
Sure.
But according to USA Hockey, we have like the second or third largest hockey adult league, rec league in the nation.
Columbus,
Ohio does. Yeah.
Seriously.
Like San Jose, I think has the largest one, and it's either Minnesota or Buffalo has the other one, and I think it's Minnesota.
Really?
Yeah, and then Columbus, Ohio. But it's because we have a lot of rinks here. We got a big chain, a big group, the Chiller.
Okay.
And like I started doing that like 2 years ago, and it came down to my buddy, you know, Rob. He and I had season tickets to the Blue Jackets team.
I've been to a few games.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing time.
It's fun.
It is.
And we got to a gear swap, and I was like, well, if I'm gonna do it, if I'm gonna buy gear and everything, I'm gonna be a goalie. I want to do that.
Nice.
So I bought gear. I got gear really cheap. Like I think the first pads I ever had, I think I still have them in the garage, and they're like held up by tape, like hockey tape. It's like the guy who had them before me, like made rope out of hockey tape.
Yes, I've seen that.
And like you just basically tied the tape up.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like terrible.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you could tell like at some point in time these pads may have been great. Not anymore.
I've seen some awesome tricks with sports tape.
Yeah. And so having that, you know, I went from there and like I think bought some more gear, saved up money, bought bigger gear and everything. You know, just I enjoy going out there and playing. It's one of the best things in life as a goalie is you see a real hot shot coming down the boards. He's got the puck, you know, and you know he's doing all kinds of tricks, fiddling with the puck, and he takes a shot, and you make the save, and you just hear him go,
That's awesome.
Just like, yep, I did that to you. That, movies, yeah, I'd say a big movie guy. I grew up with older parents.
Yeah.
I mean, you know my dad.
Right.
You know?
Right.
He is just like, he watches all kinds of movies from like,
yeah.
I mean, before like the censor board eras.
Yeah.
Like, so like for me, I was like, you know, my mom and my dad were just like, you got to watch this movie. You got to watch that movie. So like people are like, well, what's your favorite movie? And I'm like, Casablanca.
When somebody asks you something like that, it's always a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're somebody who's well cultured and well rounded. I mean, you have like this. You have basically the human history of movies that you've probably explored or been experienced in one way or another, you know, and then you have things all the way up to, you know, the modern, artistically bankrupt shit. But
well, it is, and like there's no, you can see a lot of it in the older movies too, where it can be bankrupt and like, you know, you're watching and you're just like, this is obviously propaganda designed to, you know, get you into the war or to get you to accept. You know, this thought or another thought, but like you also kind of see it's kind of campy in a way, and like you kind of like it's kind of humbling, like kind of like but it's kind of charming the way that they're doing it.
The charm.
You know, like one of my favorite ones is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Okay, yeah.
So you're familiar with that with Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart.
I'm a sucker for it because I'm also like, you know, I look at it and I go, yeah. Like he's standing up standing up to the corporation and saying like, I'm gonna fix this, and you know, just because I'm not just some, you know, Christmas tiger, I think is the line that they use.
Yeah.
Where he's just gonna nod his head, yes, you know. This is a guy standing up and saying, I know that this corporation and this senator is doing something wrong.
Yep.
We need to and I'm going to, and they're framing me, and I'm going to defend myself in front of everybody, and I'm going to do what I have to do to do that. And he basically he filibusters until he collapses. So, I got to enjoy that, the naiveness that he has in it, and it's not really, he's not stupid.
No.
In that movie.
No, not at all.
But like his attitude of what America is, or what the government's supposed to be,
right,
keeps him from first realizing like how crooked it can be.
Yep. Yeah, it's a naivete. You're right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that, that's cool. I just, that's one of those movies that I really liked. I'm just kind of all over the place, because like I can watch that. I can watch the modern movies. I
am too.
I think the last one I watched was the latest Jurassic Park.
Awesome.
My girlfriend, she was like, I want to go see that with you, and I took her aside. I'm like, okay, first
they've jumped the shark a few times, but
yes.
they jumped the shark, but
yes,
it's good entertainment, and it's dinosaurs.
I'll give them credit. In this Jurassic Park, there's a lot more. You could say, I don't know if they were being careful, but the biomechanics of the animals was a lot better, where like you could see the animal do a move, and you're like, yeah, that's reasonable.
But that was your specialty though too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I can see that and go, okay, that's reasonable. You watch like the earlier ones, and you're like not the early ones, but you watch one of the latest ones that they redid, that they've started. I think Jurassic World, the first one. There's one where like this little pterodon is picking up a woman from the water, from the mosasaur paddock, and you're looking at it going like,
I saw that.
They like flip her up into the air, and it's dude, like, yeah,
it didn't have the strength for
that. That like, if it did,
right,
like that's a lot.
Yeah,
like this isn't the big pterosaur. This is a little pterosaur, and it's doing this. Like, you gotta be. And then like I remember everybody getting up in arms because like the girl, she's running in heels from a T-Rex.
I missed that.
In that first Jurassic World, like I forget her name, but she releases the T-Rex to fight the genetic one.
Yeah,
she's running down the hall, like the paddock run in heels, and it's like, like, man, she's got ankles of steel, because that's got to be like, I've never done that, thankfully, and I'm not gonna.
No heels for you.
Yeah, no heels for me. And I've seen girls in those kind of heels, and I'm like, I don't know how you do it. So like, biomechanically, I'm looking at going, what's the math on this? How do you do that
without breaking or twisting?
Yeah. But yeah, nowadays they did pretty well. They did pretty well with it. So
what about music?
Music's all over the place for me.
Same. Yeah.
I like punk, the Clash, the Sex Pistols, the Misfits. I mean, Halloween's coming up, the Misfits.
Okay. Yeah.
But I've been on a outlaw country kick the last couple of years.
Okay.
I've been on a blues kick.
Nice.
My first concert was like Sam the Sham and the Pharaoh. My mother and father being so old, being older. Not that they're old, but like being much older than like most parents for kids my age.
Yep.
We're listening to a lot of the 60s and, and 50s and 60s and stuff. Like I saw Little Richard. I saw Tommy James and the Shondells, Jane and Dean, those kind of stuff. I grew up with a lot of that kind of early rock, like that early
rock, early blues.
Yeah. So like I can get the influence from like, go from there and get to like the Motown music that I really like, Ray Charles, from Georgia, or Diana Ross or Aretha Franklin. Used to really like James Brown.
You bounce around the airs like I do.
Yeah, all over. I think I just have kind of a mix, from there, and then it's like alternative music.
Yeah,
I had
the things that identify with our youth.
Yeah,
Well, your youth.
Well, I mean, the 90s.
The 90s.
Nirvana, yeah, of course, but like Soul Asylum,
Hey, yeah. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Oh God. So I like Soul Asylum over Nirvana, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like, what? But I always like I like them a lot.
That's a band I haven't heard from in a long time.
Yeah. Irish music. I grew up with a lot of Irish punk music. My favorite band is the Pogues.
Okay.
Because it's a good mix of. I don't know if you've ever heard them, but I highly recommend people pick up If I Shall Fall from the Grace of God by the Pogues, that album.
Okay.
Because it's got my favorite Christmas song on it, Fairy Tale of New York, which explicit language.
Okay.
Warning for anybody.
I think you sent me videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I might have.
Yeah, I think you shared before.
Yeah. And then, but it's so the Pogues are like this. They're playing like back in the day in the 80s and stuff. They're playing like IRA, songs.
Yeah, exactly.
In the 80s when there are actual car bombs going off and everything. So it's kind of a big, middle finger and everything to, the English establishment. And at the same time, they've got like this really beautiful lyrics on like the way things are happening. Mm-hmm. And their music's very pretty. The guy who sings, Shane MacGowan, he is drunk as a skunk. Like he you can barely understand what he's saying, but if you read the lyrics and can figure out what he's saying, it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Like the man's a poet. When he dies, I'll have to take a day off just to drink a lot of Irish whiskey and listen to that music. But yeah, grew up with a lot of Irish music, and Flogging Molly and Dropkick Murphys were big for me. But I mean, I skipped class one day and went to see Korn, So what do you do? You're all over the place. Yeah, and there's just kind of a good mix of everything.
That's awesome.
I had music from it was like folk metal, like Dutch folk metal. I have some of that music where it's heavy metal, but like it's kind of folksy, and like they're singing about they're probably singing about like Vikings going off and doing something.
Does Rammstein qualify as folk?
No,
that's not folk?
Rammstein's like techno, like industrial rock. But yeah, everybody thinks Rammstein, and it's really funny because I had a friend in grad school, and she was a huge metal fan, and she sent me a couple of these.
Yeah.
And I still listen to them, and they're a lot of fun because like I said, they're talking about like Viking stuff.
Right.
Like,
right.
Rammstein is kind of like the. Rammstein's fun. I won't deny that, but I always describe them as like. They're kind of like the preteen band, the preteen metal band. Like they're talking about like, hey, what'd be funny? Let's talk about butt stuff.
They're the angry angsty.
Yeah. They're doing like very beautiful done, and
They're awesome.
Rammstein.
They're awesome. Yeah.
But like but when you translate the music, and it's like they're talking about stuff, and it's like, let's talk about
Yeah.
like I said, like they're talking about like, well, let's do like anal sex and like things like that. Like that's what they're translating. I think they did one. Somebody told me that they did one where it was called it translates to no eggs, and it's actually a recipe for cake.
Yeah.
Like
I've heard these rumors too, man.
Yeah, they have a song where it's like it's really heavy and really aggressive, and it's really a recipe for cake.
Right.
And it's like they're like kind of almost like the Bloodhound Gang for Germans.
I don't know why I've never looked into it, but yes, I've heard the same thing.
They have a song called Dalai Lama, and the song is actually an old Grimm's fairy tale, just modernized.
Okay.
I translated this in German class because I learned about it and did a project on it. So Dalai Lama is named Dalai Lama because the guy he's afraid of flying. And the whole story in the song is this: the original story fairy tale is the Elf King, and basically like this father is on horseback with his kid, and they're riding home as fast as possible to get home, and the Elf King sees the kid and basically wants to kill the kid. And so, like, he sends his elves to go after him.
Yeah.
And, like, the kid hears it. The kid can hear the elves and all that stuff. So he's, like, telling his father, like, go faster. We have to get home. We have to get home. And, like, the father can't hear it. And by the time they get home, the elf king has killed the kid. It's weird like that, where it's, like, they'll do a Grimm's fairy tale song, but, like, it sounds heavy metal.
It almost looks like, I'm looking at the lyrics, it almost looks like a Labyrinth kind of thing, like from the 80s Labyrinth flick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Kind of like
with
that.
Dave Bowie.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
I talked about that in another one of my episodes.
I think that's the reason, that movie's the reason my sister's a big David Bowie fan.
Oh, David Bowie rocks, man.
He's very good. There's no denying that.
Yeah, he's been a thread through my life, my entire aware life of music and entertainment. Dalai Lama is an adaptation of Der Erlkönig.
The Elfkönig?
Yeah.
The Elfkönig? Yeah. The Elf King.
Yep, a poem written by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. 1749, 1832. Fun fact.
Sorry.
Anyway.
Yeah. It wasn't a Grimm's, but it was one of the old stories. We had to study it in German class.
Nice.
But yeah, that's one of those that's one of those things where it's like, you listen to Rammstein and it's like, they're kind of tame. If you know what they're talking about. And like they have, like, don't get me wrong, they have some songs that like you're reading it and like, I mean, they have another one on the album called Stone by Stone where he's like, I'm gonna build a house with no windows or no doors and I'm gonna put you in it. And it's like I when I translated that, I was like, so this is the Edgar Allan Poe poem, where he's bricking the guy up in the catacombs. Yeah. Weird stuff. But yeah, all over the place. Like, I listen to that. I think this morning I was listening to John Denver when I woke up,
Yeah.
So
Muppet music.
yeah. Oh, Muppet music. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, John. So we've spent the early afternoon hanging out, discovering a little bit about geology, a little bit about paleontology, a little bit about history,
and music, and
movies. What wise words do you have for our audience? What takeaways can you provide everybody with today?
My one thing that I've always told everybody is you got to adapt. So, I mean, you got to adapt to the situation no matter what it is. Biologically, adaptation is needed in order for the species to survive. That's evolution.
Very true.
But you can take it down to normal, everyday things. You're walking into a supermarket. They don't have the thing you want. You got to adapt.
Exactly. Exactly.
You got to change up. You got to learn to either change up or you got to learn to find it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the one thing that I've always told everybody, adapt. Learn to fix it. One of the first lessons I ever learned, was know your exits. Dad was a paratrooper.
Yes.
So, you got to know your exits.
Yes.
Like, it was, may have started off as a game for my sister and I.
Sure.
Find the exits. Where are they? Everywhere I go, I'm all like, I get nagged by my girlfriends from time to time. She's very, she can talk to anybody.
Sure.
I'm very introvert. I'm not very introvert, but like I'm kind of more introvert where I'm like, I can talk to people, but the first things I'm doing is I'm surveying, looking around.
Yep. You're sizing up the situation.
Sizing up trying to find and see everything. And so that's the thing. It's like it helps me because like she can communicate with the people around us while I'm doing that.
Yep.
Just to make sure that we're both being safe in the public. But like that's the number one thing that I've always kind of thought is you gotta adapt to everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Whether it be, you talk about today's world and the politics, the social aspects of it and everything.
Sure.
And it's like,
sure.
Whether or not you're on what either side or anything like that, you got to learn to adjust to an ever-changing environment.
Yeah, I think that's we're not going to slide down the slippery slope of politics right now.
No.
But I'll tell you what, I think that adapting is a key factor in who our politicians are that would better serve them
Yeah.
in their capacities as our leaders, because they don't do that too often, and
No.
we find them polarized
Yeah.
and sticking to their beliefs instead of coming together in some sort of agreement. Yeah,
Yeah, and sometimes you need to be able to agree upon things. You got to at least come together on.
we got to move the ball.
You may not be able. Yeah, you may not be able to go and get the touchdown immediately that you want,
Right.
but you got to be able to get the first down.
You got to move the ball a little bit. You
Yeah.
got to keep the society going. You got to keep our culture going.
Yeah, I mean, but and that's like I said, you got to be able to change it. Like you talk about, you make the idea of football. Like maybe the pass rush, isn't working for you to stop the other side, or maybe the passing isn't helping.
Sure.
You got to run the ball.
Right.
You take it into hockey, and it's like shot from the point might not be working. Shot from the crease may not be working. What happens if we shoot from the side?
Yep.
And that's the thing is if you don't, you're gonna go extinct.
It's a life strategy.
Yeah. Well, if you don't adapt that situation, you're gonna go extinct.
Yep.
It's the bottom line.
You're gonna
Natural
lose out.
selection's gonna select. Nature's gonna select you for extinction, and you're gonna go. There's my situation is adapt and learn.
John, when we have future episodes, you want to come back?
Sure, I'd be more than happy.
You want to do a roundtable?
Yeah. No, it'd be great to do a roundtable on most any topic.
Awesome.
Maybe I don't even know. Maybe I'm not the expert on it, but yeah.
I'd love to have you, man.
Thanks, man.
Thank you
sir.
so much for joining me.
Mhm.
And everyone out there, have a great afternoon.
Everybody be safe. Have a good one.